Hello everyone, welcome back to Sonic in the Parallel Worlds. This is once again a 2-day event focused on the Sonic the Hedgehog series and the many excellent fan games and mods that the speedrun community has picked up to run over the years. I just want to remind everyone before we get started that SGDQ 2023 is coming up May 28th to June 4th. I saw someone saying, is SGDQ tomorrow? No, it is more of this event tomorrow. So if you want to get more information about Games Done, Summer Games Done Quick, go to gamesdonequick.com for more information. Registration for the event, if you are attending, is now open until tomorrow, May 7th. So definitely get that in for yourselves. So I am joined by the Green Viper, and he's playing a game that I haven't played since like 2017 or something. If you're interested in seeing what a Metroidvania Sonic looks like, look no further. This is Sonic Chrono Adventure. Green Viper, take it away.
Thank you very much. So yeah, as mentioned, this is Sonic Chrono Adventure. It's a bit of an experiment as to what a combination of a Metroidvania and a Sonic fan game looks like. So the result is something a little bit in the middle, also with various other 16-bit games thrown in. So think stuff like Chrono Adventure, Live a Live in some storytelling beats. You've got some Gunstar Heroes, some Kirby Superstar, some Mega Man X. There's some really cool influences in here that all come together into a really nice little package that's the final send-off to Lake Pepper's Sonic fan game series before going on to make the excellent Spark the Electric Jester series. So there's a lot going on in this one, so I'll try my best to cover it all where possible, but otherwise I'm all good and ready to get this on going.
All right, feel free to count us in for the timer, and I'm really looking forward to this because I haven't seen what this game looks like in so long.
Let's go ahead and get into it then. So I'm here on the game start, so I am ready in 3, 2, 1, go. So we start off with a lot of text boxes, and you're going to see this a lot throughout the game. It's a very story-heavy fan game. We're not going to really see most of it. We're only going to sit through the stuff that's required of us. But we are here in the Sky Empire, and the gist of the game is we've got to go around, hit all the story beats necessary, and we've got to restore the Sky Empire to its former glory. Currently a little bit dilapidated, but it'll get there. It'll be fine. But we'll drop down from right about now. This would normally be a little elevator sequence in a little bit, but for now we're just going to drop into what is a standard fare classic Sonic level. You're about to see things look all good. They look like a standard, Sonic 3 perhaps designed game, but things are quickly going to go awry as we see a lot of different Metroidvania tropes all mashed quickly throughout. You might have already seen there a little signpost that's for the map system. We'll be seeing more of that in a moment's time, but otherwise we're speedrunning. We can't pause. We can't possibly look at the map. We've got a lot of different elements going on already, though. Quickly, you might notice the level design in this level is very Sonic CD-esque in that it's perhaps a little bit less designed for going fast than your standard classic Sonic design, but otherwise there is still a lot of sections where you can build up that speed in ways perhaps intended or unintended. One such fast thing we're going to do here is we're going to take some damage boosts intentionally. You might have been seeing quite a few unintentional ones, but that one there is intentional with motor bugs, and that's one that will be happening all throughout the run as well. The giant motor bugs carrying over from Sonic 4 the sequel Aftermath. Unfortunately, if you try to bounce off them, oh my goodness, that is incredible. Right, well, this is why we have a long estimate, because damage boosts don't always go as intended. So you're going to see the start of the level here immediately, or the start of the game immediately here again. I am so sorry about that. This game can be a little bit unforgiving sometimes with that sort of thing. You notice we have to go back to the intro cutscene, so we'll try and make this a little bit quicker. That's not exactly the best of solutions, but the damage done by save points in this game is really apparent because we don't get to a save point, unfortunately, until way later on. Probably about another 5 minutes or so. So especially later on in the run, there are sections where you sometimes go 20 or so minutes without getting to any sort of save. So I can't just call on a backup save, which I already have available to me, because we simply haven't reached one yet. So that's really, really bad. But these things always happen. It's never happened to me before, but, marathon run luck and all that. So it is what it is. You get to see it again. One thing I
remember, when I played this game casually a few years ago, was just the lack of save points. There's definitely, it's definitely a product of its time when it came out in 2013. It's a very interesting game. I personally preferred like the proof of concept game before the sequel Aftermath, just because it was like short, sweet, and like I think it wasn't like trying to be super obtuse. There were times where like just the lack of save points or like just like how you progress was just very backtracky. They got to me a little with this game, but I still think this is such an interesting product of its time, especially considering Fepard went on to make Spark the Electric Jester, and that is a series that has been evolving to become better than, you know, after each iteration, for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely great, and the same enemy got me again. I really can't get past it, but we're nearly out this level anyway, so the embarrassment shall be spared soon. But no, this game's definitely interesting from the standpoint of the first Spark the Electric Jester game as well, because there's a lot more DNA than I think people perhaps realize, especially especially with the engine being shared between the two. The game actually ends up being built on top of Sonic Chrono Adventures, so if you look in the right places, there's loads of DNA of this game left in there, so that's pretty fun. We are here about to get into what it can be considered a little bit of a staple of Metroidvania games. We have a shop here, we have a microcurrency, and we're going to be able to buy items. So we're going to buy a flame shield. There's a lot of standard classic Sonic shields that you'll see, the flame shield, the bubble shield throughout this game that you can purchase. We want the flame shield right now. There is another one that was introduced in Sonic after the sequel, another fan game in the series that's known as the spike shield. We'll get the properties of that later on through another character, so whenever we see them, we're going to skip them. But the flame shield is useful for I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden. There is a sequence break coming up in a little bit that we'll be using the flame shield to make it a little bit faster. So it's definitely beneficial. It used to be that you used to go out your way to get some safety rings for the run, but nowadays with it being a little bit more understood and optimized, we go out of our way instead to speed up the upcoming skip instead. So there's not too much more to this level. We're committing a cardinal sin in classic Sonic design in that we are required to go right to left rather than left to right. But otherwise, this is a really fun level, but that's a gimmick you're going to be seeing a lot. You probably have already seen the direction change screens pop up many times, so it's absolutely no different here. So we'll be seeing I can't think of what it's called. So we'll be seeing a lot of this, basically, throughout the game. Right to left, left to right, going in any which direction the game requires us to, because it's a big old map, as Amber was saying. We've got a lot of times where you do need to backtrack and do need to retrace your steps to go certain ways, and that was the first save point there, but there's a bit more of a convenient one to hit in this level here that I'm going to go out of my way for instead. This is another major plot point, and this is why I'm comparing the story beats to Chrono Adventure and Live Alive, or Live Alive. It's because we have time travel sequences going on. It's a lot less Sonic CD, a lot more like those games, especially in terms of the music you hear from them throughout as well. That's our map. You can see in the middle there, the little milk bottle looking thing. So we would normally need to refer to that a lot, and the game has a lot of signposts to remind you where you are. But as this is a speed run, we instead go off muscle memory, but you'll see a lot of terminology relating to that. So if you're ever curious and you haven't played this game yourself, that's what that's all about. So here in Wild Winter... Oh, sorry, go on.
I really feel like this game would do so well if someone could, like, if this game's code wasn't so old, I would love someone to mod in like a pause menu map, just literally anything that isn't making us use those signposts all the time. Just because it was always like confusing to navigate, I felt.
Yeah, especially when you do get that pause menu, or you do get a sign in the pause menu. Oh my goodness, that was not quite ideal. Neither was that. Wow, having some slight problems controlling this. There we go. That's a bit more like what I meant to do. One of the real big issues I find quite a lot of people have, myself included, when I first went through this, is the navigation aspect of it. And even just having level names associated with the map that you can get from the pause screen would be so much more handy than what they end up doing. It really, even casually, just comes down to memorizing what point is where on the map. It's a little convoluted, but it's also possible to love it even despite that. Once you get it all memorized, it's a little bit more of a game of memorization than it really needs to be, though.
Yeah, like, for sure. Like, I think, again, this game had so many, like, really interesting ideas. But, like, again, it's a product of its time, and, like, growing pains with the developer and everything as they, as Lake was, like, you know, getting deeper and deeper into developing games. And the Sonic fan games that he developed in particular were on such a quick turnaround as well. Granted, because they all shared, like, a similar or the same engine, but it's just like it's unprecedented to develop games at the speed that he was.
Yeah, and I think that famously goes so much so that even that's the reason this game doesn't have an original soundtrack. Those familiar with Sonic before and after the sequel will remember one of the absolute best parts, if not the best part, was their original OSTs. But here they were just here Lake developed it just way too quickly as a result and couldn't get an original soundtrack turned around. So instead we hear a lot of music from a lot of great sources. It's always a crowd pleaser at marathons like this because it always turns into a game of either guess where the song's from or I know this song, it's from a game series I love. So it has its benefits, but it is a shame to miss out on what is always like a really fun aspect of these games. But you still do get a lot of Sonic after the sequel stuff in here.
Oh yeah.
All of the good ones appear throughout as well. But yeah, there's a lot of positives to be taken away from it for sure, but also a lot of negatives. But it's an interesting product for its time. That's the phrase that I think we're both going to keep needing to use because someone could come along and absolutely do this way more justice than it deserves, than it ended up getting. But at the same time, it's still really cool. So what I've got coming up here is the first power-up of the game. This is reappearing from the aforementioned Sonic before the sequel Aftermath, and this is the sword. There were some slow slashes, but what we're using this for is we're using it to break down predetermined walls that you can see here. There were some earlier on in the level now that we're now going to backtrack to, but that's really all this ends up getting used for in this game, at least intentionally. There are one or two unintentional uses we get to show off throughout the speedrun, but otherwise, it's pretty plain and vanilla. It's just to introduce you to the concept of the power-up switching and the like. So we're just going to do our best. Unfortunately, as with the game it comes from, it is also very slow here in terms of just getting momentum into the wall. Of course, the second you hit the next wall, then you just lost all your speed. So it can be a touch slow, especially when they're spaced out like they were earlier. But you've just basically seen a snippet of how the progression works in this game now. As with all Metroidvanias, we were in a level, we couldn't access certain parts of it because we didn't have a power-up required. We got the power-up, and then we couldn't go to new areas we'd never been before. It's really well known in terms of other games in the genre, so this game implements such a similar concept. So it does stuff like that really well, I'd say. Might have seen the intentional damage boosts going on as well, and damage boosting to try and get onto platforms in time, but this level's over now, thankfully, because sometimes that can be a bit of a risk-reward situation, and the reward doesn't always pay off, but that went pretty well, all things considered. We've also got Jerem here, who is our original fan character throughout this game. We got a couple more, but Jerem's going to be helping us out here in the past. We're about to go back to the present now, and we'll experience the first major glitch of the game, the one which really baffles the mind, but it makes sense considering how basic in areas the Sonic Worlds engine is. So we're going to wait to get out this cutscene, otherwise we softlock ourselves, which is fun. So we're now going to go into the item menu, equip the flame shield. What we're going to use this for is there are 3 cutscenes over here which tell us, hey, you want to go to the left, not to the right. There's only 3 of these. They're the only thing stopping you from going around a specific story event. So we're going to run into all 3, and having the flame shield here makes it quicker to progress back to where you were. So just saving a little bit of time all in all. That's the 3 of them, and now there is nothing stopping us from skipping past what is the first encounter with both Eggman and I believe Dr. Yukano as well, the past version of Eggman, who's one of the main villains in this game. So you skip that, and not only that, you also skip the entirety of West City Zone, one of the recurring hubs of the game. You just never have to go through it throughout this entire run now, which is kind of funny, but there's a lot of different stages like that just never get to see the time of day anymore, sadly, just due to the fact that we have some clever glitches and some clever routing to get around them. But that's the first of many we'll be seeing throughout the run. I'll try my best to show you the funny ones and show you the fast ones, because that's what this game's all about. But sometimes it's a little difficult to hit everything I want to. So we'll see how it goes, but we're on good track on that regard so far. Not too much more to really say about the stage, though. As you can see, just run into the end, and then all we're doing really at this point, I think, story-wise, is backtracking. We want to go back to the past at a certain point and then go back to Wild Winter, and that triggers the major story event. We need to get the next power-up, which is how we really tend to class the progression in this game, I guess. It's the easiest way to explain it to both viewers and from our perspective as well. So we got Sword now, we've got access to the spring, and we can now make our way into a previously blocked level. This is another one of the levels that kind of serves as a hub in the early game. There's another way we need to go a bit later on, but for now, all we're doing is going into Foliage Fall Zone. And this is one of a couple levels which you can kind of lump into the exact same category, in that they're all classic Sonic levels, but they end up becoming a bit twisty and turny. You'll see throughout we'll have... we'll be going right to left, left to right, up and down. It's very corridor-like in that sense, and that's one of this game's hallmarks in terms of these stages, because you get the past and the present versions, and you get a couple more of them as well. They all just fit into the same mesh, which is taking you between the major levels of the game. Sorry, so. This one's not got a lot to it, except there's a lot of paths in terms of your classic Sonic top path, bottom path shenanigans. This is going on here, and especially in some of these stages, you can fall onto some pretty bad paths. I don't think this one's especially too great, so it is micromanaging. Am I falling onto the right path? Am I on the right one? I might need to go back, might need to go forwards. That happens a lot in these stages, so it's gonna be just trial and error, making the best of a bad situation if you're ever running this, but especially casually as well. It's a lot of these stages are built for that experience. I closely call a lot of them really Sonic CD-esque more than the other classic Sonic games. You're not quite meant to go fast, but that's the glory in it, that there's little pockets of speed you can build up. You can go around all of the objects if you want to, and you can make it fast on your own. And that's what's the most rewarding, I think everyone agrees who runs this game. So you'll see a lot of levels that thankfully lend themselves quite well to that. Others not so much, but we have our own fun with them, I guess. You'll keep seeing. We got the most blatant use of time travel here now as well. This is gonna allow us to freely time travel for the first time, and you'll also see we're in Old Castle. We're going to go into the portal, which we can now freely select whenever we come here, and we're about to go to the most obvious name of all time. It's Newcastle Zone. That's right, we're in the past. How could you tell? I'm going to mash for a save here just in case, and we're going to go back to the version of this stage in the past, which once we get the final power-up of the game actually ends up being one of my true favorite stages in this run. It becomes so fluid and just nice to get through, but for now it's a little bit of a slog, but we'll make it even quicker sooner rather than later, don't you worry. But the gimmick in this one is we jump really high. That's all we've got to do. We've got to get through the platforms, got to not bonk into as many as possible, and do those improved jump heights in order to make our way to the end, which in this case is on the left. And then the backtracking has now begun proper, but we'll start seeing some familiar stages as well in a second, and once again how that interacts with the Metroidvania mechanics of the game. But it's pretty standard from this point onwards. You're going to notice with a lot of the stages, there's not a lot you can say after a point, because they do, at least some of them tend to repeat, both thematically and the main objective-wise, so especially towards the end of the game, there's a couple of levels that really just do the same thing, just with a different coat of paint. So this is one of them, so we're luckily all the way out there now. Back in Wild Winter, though, and we've got to go all the way back through the stage, you'll be pleased to hear. Except, not quite. You might remember the sword power-up could have been used here, so we're now going to take this, and this is slightly faster than doing it normally yet again, so this should at least buy us back some time here. So once we do that, we'll be a forced cutscene in the Wild Winter Zone 2, and that'll be all we need to do back here in the past. And then we get on to the real fun stuff, the new content. But it's pretty standard until we eventually get there. So we got to use the springs one more time. There's still nothing in this stage, unfortunately, but the goodness is about to come in a second because we're forced to run back through here. So I'm going to be honest with you, I completely have no idea what's going on in this plot. If anyone is in the chat and wants to explain it to the fellow chat members who are confused, please feel free. It's very convoluted at points, requires a bit of knowledge of Sonic after the sequel as well. So I've never actually fully completed this game casually. I only got right to the end about I want to say 7-8 years ago. And since then, I went fully into runs after already speedrunning Sonic 4 the sequel Aftermath. So a lot of this is actually completely alien to me, so I'm trying my best, but I don't know. We're under some sort of ambush, I guess, and we're going to let this boss completely cook itself as a result. So this is about a 45-second, effectively auto-scroller. If you get lucky, you can just stand in place, but unfortunately, I've not got the good spawn, so I have to move. How threatening, I know, but he's trying his best. Jerem will come to the rescue any moment now, though. Any moment. And then it'll be time for... Well, Eggman's gonna get a little bit leery, so it's our time to put a stop to him, at least momentarily. Thanks, Jerem. Could have come in a bit sooner, but we're doing all right. So going back through all the same usual cutscenes as well, but one last time, back in Wild Wave. What's going on over there? It's time to crash this party, of course. Eggman's Balloon Park. Not quite Balloon Park from Sonic 3, but it might as well be, to be honest with you. It's a land of fun. So we now got that spring open thanks to doing all of the story triggers over there. So as a result, we can now just run all the way over to the right place, which you're about to see in a second. There's one level in between us, between now and then, but you're going to see that it's a piece of cake. There's really nothing to this one. This will be a real level a bit later on, but for now, we just got to roll. And Eggman's fun amusement park begins. Now, I'm sure we've all got bad memories of Eggman Land in this chat and everywhere else who's watching this, but this is for sure. Eggman's done a good job here. Oh, wow. Momentum glitch. Great stuff. But Eggman's done a great job. This is such a fun stage to play. For reasons you'll see in a second, it's got some of the best gimmicks in the game, and it also introduces us to our third power-up. So we've got these coils here, these static balloons, and also some non-static balloons that are going to allow us to jump all the way to the top. We're going to want to stay on a high path for the most part. We just collected an EXP upgrade for a power-up we're about to get shortly as well. I say shortly, probably in about half an hour, honestly. We just collected an EXP power for it now, which is conveniently on the top path. But aside from that, we're just going to stay here for speed's sake as well. This stage can unfortunately be quite tricky in the sense of you can get the wrong angle when jumping into a slope, and slopes are a little bit of a pain in this game, to be completely honest with you. It's so easy to get stuck in place and lose all your momentum that you had when you were jumping into them. So it's really just making the best of a bad situation in that regard as well. Speaking of which, we actually use the issue with slopes to our advantage there, as you can run into a circle or a circular object at the right angle. And, well, you get some benefits from that in that you gain all your speed walking into it immediately, and you can jump into it and avoid having to go all the way around. So it swings and roundabouts, really. We can use the things that casually hinder us to a speedrunner's advantage, but also the things that hinder us in the speedruns to the speedrun advantage as well. This is a very plot-important feather, as this allows us to time travel freely. We can jump over it, to be honest. Scripted cutscenes aren't so scripted in this game. You can jump and sometimes move in them as well. And you've just seen that. So we'll see this at the end of the next level. It actually appears in a cutscene again. It assumes we've collected it. It's not a real in-game item, but it is an item that is used throughout all the cutscenes. So it'll be funny to see it reappear, despite it not being in our collection right now. Some more slope glitching going on. Not quite the ideal one, but it'll do. Should probably actually take this balloon, thinking about it, if I can get the height here. I'm mashing the A button or whatever you have it mapped to on your controller, since the inbuilt control scheme here sucks. So it's always recommended to use joy to key, especially just for all of these games in general, but especially Chrono Adventure. If you saw the opening screen, it actually doesn't claim to have proper controller support, but it does. Third power-up coming up here now as well. So much to talk about, so little time, but this is also reappearing from Sonic 4 the sequel Aftermath. These are the hover boots. They work much the same as the jet shoes in Kirby and even have the exact same sound effect. So we can get a little boost upwards or to the side by just tapping the button, or we can hold and get a big boost. The only real drawbacks with these shoes are, unfortunately, I'm speed capped after a while. Or speed capped on the floor to where I can build up momentum from slopes and the like, but running from a standstill is significantly slower, as you might be able to see, than playing as just Sonic's normal state. That's one of the issues. The other one is the momentum glitch. You can get the wrong angle going into walls, unfortunately, and you can completely get stuck in an invisible box against the wall. So you might see me just stand still at some points in the run, and it looks like I'm not doing anything. I actually am doing something, but the game has decided to trap me in jail. So not the actual jail we're seeing later on in this run, though, but it is really irritating. It happens with the spin dash sometimes as well, so I've just really got to try my best to not bonk into walls with the hover boots. This boss fight here, there's really not an awful lot to say. It is cycle-based, but generally you can kill it just after it does that little schmoovin' attack it just did there. I'm going to get the hover boots here, charge up a hover into the screen transition, and let go immediately, and that will carry it into the next level. And I can just get a little bit of a faster start going into this. We're just climbing up to the top here now, and we're about to go back into the past once again. But before then, we've just got to get out of Eggman's Funfair now that we've fought the first official boss fight of the game. So this is a very vertical level. Luckily, we've got our new best friends with us, at least for the moment. We'll have an item which does most of the heavy lifting that these do later on towards the end of the game. But for now, the hover boots can be really useful in a couple of levels. So we're going to hang on to them tightly, but due to the ground speed thing, we're going to give up on them in a bit. Also, speaking of breaking cutscene automation, we're flying, or at least we're walking in midair. And there we go. Here's our aforementioned feather. Lovely stuff. That's all that level wrote, though. And now back into the past and into probably one of my least favorite levels, honestly. This is the most twisty, the most maze-like. It is a literal maze on purpose, and it's so difficult to get onto the top route, yet so easy to fall down. There's a lot of enemies here that you can get stuck in their hitboxes and completely stuck in place for ages, so it's just slow, cumbersome to navigate around. It's a pretty low point for a lot of people trying to get into the game, and in fact, unfortunately, it has turned off one runner from getting into the game I remember back in the day, so it's a real shame, but don't let this put you down. There's so much good stuff in here to make up for it, but yeah, certainly this level isn't perhaps the best showcase of what this game can do. But we did some trickery there with a red spring to make our way up to the top path. And luckily we managed to maintain it a bit easier than usual. But you can see just how stop-starty this next section here is going to be. It's not the greatest, bless it. But it's trying into a better level now, though. And things are going to require the hover boots. So back on they go, I guess. I said back on the go. Don't press the button too many times. That's a mistake. So you might hear a little sound effect sometimes when I'm going into levels. That's actually the boost power-up, which is the fourth one we get in the game. For some reason, during screen transitions, it can actually be active. And we're activating it and getting a small burst of speed going into these levels. Just an example of how janky this game can really be behind the scenes sometimes. Going on the top route here, that's going to allow us to... What's it going to allow us to do? It's going to allow us to skip all the water sections, which aren't really too slow, to be honest with you, but they can be a little bit tricky in regards to keeping your rings. I've got momentum glitched already. That's fantastic. Please let me out. Oh, wow, this is really not going to plan. Or there, either. Okay, there we go. We're out. So we're going to use them mainly when we're in the water, but they are pretty useful in other areas as well. So that's all that counts, but we're about to enter it, and you're going to see these things get a little bit of a buff underwater. They get more air, they go a bit faster, they're great. I got stuck against the wall again. This is really not going to plan. We're nearly out here, though. I just got to do an unintended shortcut here, avoid the spikes on the top of the ceiling, and I can barely use my height from that water to just skip going around that thing. Just gonna boost my way out. Oh boy! Ceiling running. That's gonna come in useful later in the run. Most of the time before then, it's a real pain though. Okay, so back into what is just a cutscene level at this point. That's all it's good for, so... Nice spring skip there, but that's all this one's really good for. We're gonna talk to Jerem about 2 or 3 times, so... Oh wow, I did not expect that to actually work. So we're going to skip at least one of the instances of this stage's very small gimmick, which is these things shoot you upwards. So you're going to want to get shot upwards by them into where you need to go. Please shopkeep. Please don't talk to me. Okay, fine. Unfortunately, the use power-ups button, which is on X, and the talk to villagers button is on the exact same button. So sometimes that does cause issues like that, especially where it eats all your speed. This level, there's not really too much to it, to be honest. I am just going to do a bunch of peel outs and hope that I get the jumps at the right angles to avoid slowing down. So that was so nearly it, but not quite. And then we got one more to come here as well. And then we're out.
I appreciate the jump in a cutscene.
Yeah, there's a lot of jumping in cutscenes. As I kind of said, there's a lot of jumps in cutscenes. You can turn around in them as well. There's a lot of jank like that. That's just, from the casual perspective, really funny to go through and do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're in a level where the only thing we really have going for us for a gimmick is we get slowed down on purpose. We got to run against this current. This one, the only other thing really of worth mentioning about it is, aside from this, which of course it's slow, we're speedrunners, we don't like going slow, but at least we're all going at the same speed. We're all forced to. The only other thing about this is it's another level with it's very tall, so there's a lot of ways that you can fall onto different paths, and there's different paths you can fall onto which actually send you back quite a way through the level, just as a result of how the level is designed. So I'm going to try my best to avoid it, but it can happen, and it is a regular run killer, so we'll try our best despite that. But thankfully, it's a little bit of downtime in what is otherwise a very hectic run, as you might have expected from the commentary so far. There's so much going on, and yet we're getting into a point of the run now where it's a little bit more chill, I'd say, for the most part. There's downtime until we get the fourth power-up now, so we're mostly just getting through the story beats that the game really wants us to. So I'm going to take this opportunity to roll here and hopefully build up a bit more speed going into this one. Didn't quite work as intended, but at least I can damage boost through here. But yeah, a little bit of a slowdown in the game progression now. It's worth mentioning, I've not brought it up at this point, for those not familiar with the game, casually, as Amber alluded to, especially if you get lost, it's a pretty long experience. I think it averages around, for most people, 20-25 hours, I think. We're currently probably about what would be the 5-hour mark, just because of all of the sequence breaks, and mainly cutscenes. A lot of the time so far is just cutscenes. It's a really long one, so it's worth mentioning. This is the most trollish level in the run. You don't go left, you don't go right, you go down, then left, because you're in the middle of the map, down in the transition point between the two. That's one where if you're coming back to the game after a long time having not run it, or you're getting into it for the first time, that one always tricks you, and it's followed immediately by a level that's pretty horrible in that trollish regard as well. Because what we're looking for here is, first of all, we get slowed down by the snow. Not ideal. But second of all, the second gimmick going on here is the snow right here. We're feeling around in the snow for springs, and particularly we want red springs. Now, you can't even use the top of the map, or sorry, the top of the screen to line up where exactly the red spring should be because of how the camera works. So as such, it's really just a lot of feeling around in the dark to try and find if you're actually on the red springs. It can be pretty horrible if you accidentally go too far, aren't far enough, because you can lose so much time to just going, where is this spring? So we thankfully got out of it somewhat more, not even, just less harshly, to be honest, not even well, just better than it could have been in comparison to some people. This one really takes a lot of runs, unfortunately, just because it can feel really random when there's nothing visually to line yourself up with. We're into the... Oh, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, apparently my casual playthrough, because I still have a video of it, took me about 6.5 hours.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Yeah.
I remember mine taken... I must have streamed it in like 2015, and I remember it. Yeah, it must have taken so many sessions.
Yeah,
oh, wow, that's never happened before.
Yeah, mine was like 5 years ago in a single setting, and I definitely remember getting very fatigued.
Yes,
because,
that is very valid.
The game does take a while to navigate.
Yeah, especially some plot points as well. It just dumps you on the other side of the map and just expects you to remember how to get there. And
yeah,
if it's in the past or present, you've just really got to know your way around it, unfortunately. But it's still quite a fun experience casually, but a very confusing one. You got to really like the level design in order to stick with it for the most part. It's one like that, but yeah, as you mentioned, just because of all of the backtracking, it really can take it from, like you mentioned, 6 hours to something ridiculous like 10, 15, 20. Because I think that's absolutely where mine was around, and I didn't even get to finish the game in the end. I think I got to the final power-up, and that was where it ended, because I had no clue where to go next. So it's definitely an odd-running problem with it.
Yeah, the game does not make it clear. Even through, like, some of the story, it doesn't make it very clear, because the story, again, is, as you mentioned earlier, very convoluted. I actually forgot about Garam, or Jaram, like, however it's pronounced. I actually completely forgot about the OC. I remember the owl thing throughout the entire story, but I think it also is a present plot point in after the sequel. I can't quite remember.
That guy's EGATs with the ATS part standing for after the sequel, which is always fun. There's both that and the Polums. You might have just seen the Polum taxi, if people are paying attention. Both those two are reoccurring elements in the series, and the Polums are meant to play a pretty big part in this game, in the end game. You'll be seeing that doesn't happen in this run, but yeah, they're both recurring characters that you also need to have knowledge of, so it's so convoluted. But if you're a fan of these fan games, it's a really nice ending to what are otherwise pretty story uninvolved fan games, I'd say, for the most part. You can really enjoy the others with no knowledge. This one, however, is just kind of meant to be the long form send off to them, which is, it's nice, but kind of a shame it ended where it did as well. But at the same time, we got Spark the Electric Jester when we did, so you win some, you lose some for sure. And thanks, Ceiling, again. But yeah, no, these games can be very confusing, but for the most part, casually, I think they're all right. Just you need a lot of patience with them for sure.
Yeah, before the sequel, I thought was like probably the simplest in terms of story, because it's literally just trying to tell the story of like how Sonic and Tails met in their first like kind of like adventure together against Eggman. It was really just Tails following Sonic along until Sonic finally noticed him, senpai. But like that one was definitely the most simplest, and then like after the sequel I have no memory of. I have not replayed that in so long. I replayed before the sequel via the DX like port someone that wasn't Lake made for Sage one year, like fairly recently, which gave it like a drop dash and 16:9 support. There's also Lake did remake or like kind of like touch up after the the with 16:9 and drop
entirely
dash.
Different story, but
it's a whole other can of worms, because it was a lot of people complained about the handling of that one.
Yeah, I know. Well, because I guess it's worth bringing up the story as well of how we got into Sonic Chrono Adventure in particular, since that kind of ties into that. It's worth mentioning. Because originally, a lot of us, I was a speedrunner of Sonic before the sequel Aftermath, just because, by pure coincidence, really. We had a lot of people who sped ran Sonic after the sequel. Oh my goodness, this is not going well. They sped ran Sonic after the sequel, and were kind of not too happy with how the DX version went, and everyone kind of stayed on the original version just for the sake of it. So there was a lot of animosity towards that, and I think everyone was looking for something new to do. So between us all, we all decided, why don't we butt heads all together and run Sonic Chrono Adventure. It's the longest, it's the grandest, it combines all of our abilities. And yeah, over the course of like a year and a half, previous Sonic After the Sequel world record holder, Burnsies, who's in the chat and is very actively against Sonic After the Sequel DX. Between us all and my knowledge of the Metroidvania game that came before this already, it kind of just made sense from all our perspectives. So that's why I know nothing about the story of this, because I figured it was way better to just go in with this blind and try and make sense of all that and dedicate my brain space to that, instead of just putting my glitch hunting prowess that I kind of somewhat had from that game to the test. And Yeah, butting our heads together, we got a lot of cool strats coming out of it, including the next one coming up in the next boss, which was actually found by Burnsies. So definitely worth paying attention to there, because it saved all our bacon, both casually and speedrun-wise. It's really helpful. So we're in this boss section here. I probably should have started mashing later, but I'm going to spam for a save just in case, because this does need to be marathon safe after all, for as much as we do want to go fast. So the game here switches you back to normal Sonic with the expectation that you're not going to want to use the hover boots that we're using all throughout there. So it was really Burnsy's discovery here that led to us, it was pretty much all him that discovered that the hover boots here are super OP. You're not really intended to use them. This is a really fiddly and, to be honest, pretty horrid boss fight casually. I got stuck here for a good hour or so when I first played this game, and I know a lot of other people who feel the same. Initially, when we first started this, it was a big run killer, but using just the small zips of speed and height and the rest of it, we can get just barely enough height to clear a lot of these a lot of the on-screen orbs you've been seeing here that we have to, if you didn't pick up what we're doing in the last level, we have to line them up with the orbs on the ground. So we have to do the same thing here, but just due to the fact that you're not really meant to have these things, this is just completely unintentional, and it makes it so much easier with all of these other orbs, these, I don't know what you really even call them, I guess projectiles going around. So I keep missing this one because this is clearly not the intended way of doing it. But wow, okay, there we go, that's more like it.
Okay, cool. Eventually fell into it.
Yeah, this boss fight ends up being a lot of that, and especially, like mentioned, that was clearly not the intended way of getting it, but it's actually significantly easier sometimes than the intended way of getting these things. Either that or damage boosting, so... Wow, I've never been hit there. We're out, though. That's the main thing.
No memory of this mechanic, by the way, where you're just lining things up with the crosshairs. I have no memory of this. How did I block so much of this game out?
It's probably worth it for the sake of your mental health, honestly. As I said, I remember that being so stressful playing this game through the first time. So it's taken a lot of practice to... I'm not going to claim I'm good at this game or anything, but it's taken a lot of practice to even get to the point where it's like, thank goodness I don't have to worry about dying there anymore, you know? It's pretty bad.
Yeah, like, let me be frank, like, this game is definitely worth checking out if you are at all curious. But I want you to look under the title of the game in the top right of the stream, or top left of the stream. I can't tell right from left. You'll see PC 2013. This came from a year, or a time period where Sonic Worlds was a thing. Sonic Worlds being the engine this was built on. And also, like, you know, before the sequel and after the sequel, they were... the cutscenes were made in like Adobe Flash, and so you can't watch the cutscenes anymore without using like before the sequel DX, which wasn't even like handled by Lake, or using YouTube.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Windows 8, I think, was the first one to break that, and every Windows since has broken it again. Oh wow, I've even got momentum glitched. For those who are curious as to why I was so upset there, I don't know how to play this stage because normally that skip is super consistent. So we are here in the super trippy dream stage I would normally reset at if I missed, but instead, here I am playing it. I am having a little bit of input latency on my end, so I completely missed the skip that would normally go on here. So this is pretty bad, but this is once again why we have a lofty estimate, because deaths and stuff like this can really screw us about. So this is purely sight reading, to which I apologize about profusely. This is me doing my best of a bad situation once again, which is really the tagline of this game, is micromanaging all the bad things that happen to you throughout the course of a run. So I actually don't even know the story behind this. This is just a trippy dream sequence that Sonic and Redalia, your basically Navi stand-in for the game, go through. Afterwards, you get returned to normal. I'll explain what I was meant to do just for the sake of it, because I don't know what else to talk about in this level at this point. So what I was meant to do was charge up the... Oh my, wow. Okay. I was meant to charge up the... That's much better. The hover boots all the way to the right, and then let go during the cutscene transition. That would then push me into a wall, which I would then need to zip all the way left through. I can't believe this. I'm stuck in momentum glitch now as well. This is going so bad. But yeah, I would then at that point be inside a wall. I'd run all the way over to the left, and I'd bounce back off another elevator, which would then allow me to hit the trigger to get into the next stage. If I'd hit a save point, I probably could have reset to the save point, but I actually topped. Oh wow! I took the top route, which takes me all the way past that. But hey, this run has gone completely awry. I had one good run in me today that just conveniently before this marathon happened to world record after like 11 months.
The
and now
classic.
I got the super bad one in me for the actual marathon. This is how it goes. Check that one out if you want a more competent example, I guess, of how this run goes. But yeah, this is purely sight reading, to which I have to really apologize about.
It's all good. This is content, if nothing else. But
Content trademark, my number one promise that I was going to bring to this marathon. I noticed as well on Twitter we were at some point referred to as, I think, professional gamers, to which I was so surprised by because I just preempted something like this happening. Oh dear, this is one of the longest levels in the game as well, in case you couldn't tell. So this is luckily we've got that roughly like 15-minute long estimate to account for stuff like this. Yeah, these guys are damaging us now, by the way, because why not? At this point, anything's game in this level. It's I guess it's kind of like cartridge tilting from back in the day is the closest thing I can equate this to, because what on earth do you describe this as otherwise? It's basically a glitch in intentional form. I don't know what this is. Oh, we're finally at the end. Thank goodness. We're going back on track at long last. Right, so we pretend that never happened, basically. I think we can all collectively agree.
Rodalia saying, "What just happened? Did I fall asleep?" is basically how we feel right now.
As long as chat didn't fall asleep, then that's what's good with me, because, you know, that was far from ideal, but we still made it out. This is the longest bit of text mashing in the game now, then. It's worth mentioning that, thankfully, unlike a lot of RPGs, the text mashing here isn't actually that strict, I guess. You don't have to hit like 2 or 3 times a second like you do in a lot of RPGs to mash optimally. It does buffer a lot of input, so as long as you're kind of hitting like 1 to 2 times a second, then you're generally getting the mash on time. So there's not a lot of time to be lost here, thankfully, and hand health is much better for it as a result. I never used to know that, so I used to just go ham on my circle button, and my hands hated me for it. But now I know better. I'm just buying time because, like mentioned, really long cutscene. We're going to prison. We did a big naughty by disobeying the Sky Empire, and we're paying the price for it. So this is the one time in the game we get to play as original the character Jerem here, but we also get to play as Sonic. We got to switch back and forth between the two and hit 2 switches, which then open up a gate which lets us out. I'm going to play as Jerem first and get the top switch because I want to leave Sonic in a position to get the bottom switch as it's the fastest. And then I want to take Sonic. That is the wrong button. There we go. I then want to take Sonic to the... That is not the right way. There was a recent change to this where Jerem's now the one who gets the top button. It used to be the other way around. That's why I'm getting slightly lost. Yeah, once we get Sonic to his button, we then want to take Sonic to the exit. Reason being for that is because if you go there as Jerem, it will switch you straight back to Sonic. They will actually switch you back to where Sonic's location is, not where Jerem is right now. So you can imagine how that might be quite time costly, and it absolutely is. So we're doing all the zigzag platforming here to get Jerem through, and he's there. So now we go back to Sonic, and we go to the much shorter bottom path. Don't have too much more to say about Sonic, so fun little fact about Jerem there in terms of how he plays. I mentioned earlier that Sonic Chrono Adventure is actually the exact source for Spark the Electric Jester, which is, by the way, an awesome game which you can grab on Steam and would highly recommend. Jerem is actually the character who was used for all of the physics, basically as the base of Spark in that game. So they actually control quite similarly as a result, which is kind of cool. But he doesn't really have much purpose in this game, but at least his legacy lives on as Spark the Electric Jester himself, who, depending on if the credits get to roll, we'll also be seeing a cameo from a little bit later on in the game. Not a cool one, but just a little teaser for what's to come. There we go. It seems like quite a low security prison. We're out. I'm going to mash for a save. I missed it. Doesn't matter because we got one in the next level. Just as proof of how naughty we were, we are now going to fight the military. I don't think it's quite literally the military, but we're going to fight a jet engine here. I'm going to go for a recently discovered boss strat where I'm going to hit his projectiles here and do a sword slash. I'm going to try and do this twice in a row because that will allow me 2 hits, and then I want to get 5 hits in on him when he comes down like this, and I should be able to get a quick cycle. I should be able to do this in 2 cycles, sorry, rather than 3. Not ideal. I only got 4 hits in that cycle there, so I'm going to need to do a hit with a sword once more, but I should then be able to save myself sitting through another 3rd cycle of all this. That is really bad. Jeez. That is really, really bad. Okay, well, we're sitting through the 3rd cycle then. Fine. Oh, we really definitely are now.
Oh yeah,
then.
this thing from the true ending of after the sequel.
Yeah, there you go. Here he is in all his glory. We wouldn't have to see him that much if I'd done this optimally, but you get an example of how slow this now becomes once he's here, so I am just going to wait for the jet here at this point. There we go. Not the greatest, but we didn't even know that was a thing until about a week or so ago, as I was just randomly messing with this game, so you're not gonna be missing out from what was effectively just a recent change. Finally at a point now, though, where we can get the 4th power-up of the game, and it's in another one of my favorite levels here. This is one that I struggle with the ending of quite a lot because this power-up is a little bit picky in how it wants to work, how it wants to recharge, and a lot of other factors that can really mess with me in the run. But the main goal here of Magnetic Mine is the faster you go, the higher your jump. So, as mentioned, the spin dash has a bit of a momentum bug in that if you spin dash into walls, unfortunately, a lot of the time it will kill your speed dead and you can't move anywhere afterwards until you move away from the wall. This does not apply to the peel out, so you're going to see me quite a lot just doing a peel out against the wall, and the game is not going to punish me for this in the slightest. So you'll see a lot of really goofy examples later on when I'm clearly meant to take a spring, but instead, this is not a spring, that doesn't count, that's an enemy. But there's a lot of goofy examples where I'm meant to clearly take a spring, and instead, like this, I can just go, nope, and jump straight up and make it straight past. So this is one of my most favorite levels as a result of that. There's just a lot of really wacky time saves you can do here, which, of course, are absolutely unintentional, and it's all the greater for it. But the complete scope of this level changes in a moment when we will instead be using the new power-up, and it goes way differently. So we're nearly there, and I can almost show you what it is, and I'm sure for some people who aren't perhaps fans of classic Sonic games, this is the change you've always wanted. But for now, we're just going to keep peel outing until we get to our final destination here, which is right about now. So it says go to the exit. We actually can't make it to the exit yet until we go this way, which will get us the boost shoes. Now, these things are a real pain in the backside. Even though we got a power up for them earlier on, they charge super slow. So I'm actually going to have to use some visual cues here to make sure I do the exact right amount of boost. Otherwise, I completely block myself out of getting up to the next area. I have to wait about 30 seconds for a recharge. It's not ideal. Thankfully, we made it through just fine. I think that was as the result of practicing that for about 20 minutes today, because that was not going all right for most of the practice going on so far for the last couple of days. But that's nice. We've only got... Oh, that's not ideal. Okay, well, it's fine. We've only got one more level that requires this thing to go, after which point we can use it however we like. Just going to grab some silver rings for safety there. And we've got one more instance where we need to use this to run up a slope. I need to make sure to actually keep it on me because I can't make it up the slope, as you just saw, unless I have some boost. Fun little fact about this level actually is I keep mentioning Sonic 4 the sequel Aftermath since there's so much DNA shared between these two games. This is the only returning song from that game. Of course, not actually from it, it's from Sonic Unleashed, being Cool Edge Night, I believe, in particular, but here it's used as the theme of, well, a level I like a lot less than Cool Edge Night, to be honest. While it can be cool on paper, you're already seeing the problem that I've run into. I'm out of boost again, and I need boost to hit these weird wall wart things in order to gain the height needed to get out this level. So it's going to be a lot of careful boost conservation. You can see I would normally boost into that, but I'm going to have to conserve based on just how this level's gone so far. I'd also normally go straight over to the right there, which wastes a ton of boost, but because I'm a little low, I'm instead going to have to play it a bit more safe than typical. We're going to get out, and we're about to do a sequence break we messed up the glitch last time, so it's about time I rewarded you instead with a really cool one. So normally we would go all the way to the right here and go for a couple levels, including West City, which I mentioned we completely skip in the run. Instead, we're going to go up, well, a rather unintended shaft here. So you can see there's no elevator here anymore like there was earlier. So we're going to charge up a long boost here as the hover boots. We are now going to use these hexagons to parkour our way. It's kind of ironic given the hexagon connection to Lost World, but we're going to parkour our way up here, and that's going to reach a loading trigger. And we can then make our way into a boss fight, because believe it or not, it's actually quicker to play a boss fight than it is to play 3 relatively short levels, because it drops us right where we need to be for the 5th and final power-up and to progress the game to the final needed state. So I think I actually need to go this way, don't I? I'm thinking of a later version of this level. So we're about to get into what is dubbed what I dub the afterburner route, but in particular the boss fight that goes with it. Nice, I actually got that. I was playing it a little bit safe to make sure I could get it. Once again, slightly unintended use of these pre-programmed cutscenes here, because you can see I was carrying all my momentum and jumps through them in order to make it through what you'd otherwise sit at the bottom of that bit there, but I used the I used the pre-planned cutscene to instead make it over and make it a little bit quicker to get into this boss. All I'm doing here is just purposefully moving a bunch of the enemies into areas I want them to go to. So I want to get that one to the right height so I can keep hitting it even after it's done its laser. I want this one just far along enough because I can kind of hide behind it and do these hits here. And that's what I really want out of this. But doing this boss fight skips about 3 levels and one of what used to be my least favorite tricks in the game, which is zombie hovering. If you ever have seen Wind Waker HD speedruns, it's the same thing as zombie hovering there. A lot of mashing to gain a lot of height to get to unintended areas. And there were 2 instances of this in the run. And the route that we skip past is one of them. It's something like ideally 30 hertz mashing required to gain the height with the small little zips. You would gain successive height each time and get enough height to get up onto an unintended path in one of the levels, which would then let you go all the way around to Old Castle. But this just drops us right off in Old Castle, this boss fight, so it is absolutely way quicker to do this instead, which I'm thankful for, because we get a jam. You can imagine the bullet travel time is a big factor in the boss fights. We just stay right on the sore spot in his head. Sorry about that, buddy, but there's 0 bullet travel time, so you want to be right inside the hitbox for that at all times. Not much to say about this level now. We don't want to take the time travel, as we actually need to be in the present here in order to go to the area which contains the final power-up. So we can finally access this because these rocks are exclusive to the boost shoes. We need them in order to be able to break them down. The other power-up we're about to get can also break them down, but until then we're completely locked out of such areas. So here we are in Angel Terminal, and I'm going to switch back to normal Sonic. So the big gimmick here is there's a lot of bumpers. And these bumpers push you all over the place, as you can imagine, so it can be a little tricky to get around everything you need to get around. So we're going to do our best of it. But once we get to the end, we'll need to backtrack here, back through. But we'll have the item, and the item is this elusive power-up I've mentioned a couple times throughout the run, or at least alluded to, and it is every bit as overpowered as the scattered mentions would make you believe. So I want it as soon as possible, but I've still got to deal with some fun bouncy physics until then. So we'll just slowly go past all the spikes, and you can imagine, based on looking at the ceiling and the levels of the terrain, you know, how high and low they are, as to why this might be just a tad annoying to try and build up speed in, but I'm doing my best here. So I don't want to bounce off of those particular bumpers, just because they will bounce me in any which way. As you can see, there are some that I do want to come off of, as they'll give me just the speed required, but unfortunately those ones aren't the ones. Also, enemies are doing much the same thing. Sometimes you can run through them, sometimes they aren't as nice to you. Anyway, here we go, the bumper gloves. Oh boy, these things. So I get a double jump here, which I can use to break down these sorts of bumpers, and I also get this big punch here, which I can use on these larger bumpers in order to gain extra height and go around a different way through the level. Now, if you've been watching this marathon, I'm sure you're no doubt familiar with the concept of patching. I mean, it came up in a big way at the start of the marathon, and normally in a lot of speed games, I'm not counting any of the ones we're talking about here, of course, but in a lot of speed games, it's a lot slower. Devs will go out their way to patch things that speedruns use. It's a constant back and forth of a cat and mice game until eventually the dev stops caring and the speedrunners win. Sonic Chrono Adventure, then, is actually one of the few examples where, not on purpose, but an updated version of the game is actually significantly faster than the original downgraded version, and I'll allude to you why in just a second. But the new feature that these bumper gloves got in 1.1, which is really the big change here, is that they got a double jump. They never previously had this in the original release version of the game, but just to speed it up a bit, because it can be really slow to charge up these punches, as you've seen, just to speed it up a bit, you got a nice little double jump. Now, unfortunately, in QAing this double jump, there was no such mention to, or there was no such thought put into, should we, say, limit the amount of times you can double jump in succession, or even the phrase, should we put a speed cap on this? There is no speed cap to these bumpers whatsoever, or to these bumper gloves whatsoever, so we'll be seeing that in a big way impact the final levels of the game here. But we've also got the fact that, say, there are a couple items towards the end of the game that also mess with the properties of your jump. It can give you a big fling forwards. For example, some of the items, you can also have other properties, like they make you jump really high, etc. We don't have that. We don't have that luxury of playing it normally here. Please double jump. Okay, no, fine. We don't have that luxury here, but we will see the bumper gloves instead make mincemeat out sections like that as well. So I'm going to switch back to them here and try and go slow, therefore, to avoid that happening. Just for the fans, you can interact with these cutscenes in a slightly unintended way as well. So off Sonic goes to his home planet. That's not quite what you meant to do. Here we go. This is going to be the big show of the speed cap here for the most part. So I'm going to do a bunch of double jumps, and you can see, yeah, that's already a bit faster than we've been going minus the boost shoes in the game. And remember this level, its big gimmick was making you jump higher? Well, even with your normal jump here, you jump higher. So imagine what happens with your double jump also being added into the mix. The answer is carnage. This becomes one of my favorite levels as a result. It's really fun to mess with when done optimally with these gloves. And there's a lot of levels and a lot of examples of this happening a bit later on in the run as well. So all we're doing at this point is backtracking, but we're not backtracking in the way the game intended for us to, because I mentioned the polems play a big part in this game. They're those enemies you're seeing there right now. You're also seeing them as taxis throughout the game, and normally they'd be a big NPC presence, which we haven't really seen because we skipped most of the levels where they would appear.
Oh, right. But I remember that.
Yeah, so it's a big part of the game, and if you might remember the weird fangamey part where Sonic becomes a polem.
Yep,
you have any such memory? Yep. Well, we were meant to go to that back in Old Castle. We're saying no to that. So we're here in Wild Winter. There is luckily a polem taxi, once again, rather ironically, this keeps happening, that takes us back here to Sky Speedway. So we're going to take the elevator all the way up. Now, there is currently a locked off trigger for the beginning of the end game sequence in this level that you're not meant to be able to get to until you do that polem section, which is about 20 minutes of speedrun content. It's even longer casually. It's a lot of story stuff, and it's also 2 boss fights and 4 levels, so it's absolutely worth it to skip it. Now, what we're going to do here is I'm going to switch to the boost shoes. I'm going to run up the ceiling in a certain way. I'm now going to switch to my hover boots, and I'm going to completely clear the wall, which is meant to block my progress. So I think once the camera shift happens, I'm fine. And now I'm going to be over this wall, and we're going to go earlier than anticipated into the endgame sequence. Now, the irony doesn't stop there, because I didn't get time to explain it, because it's a really quick trick, but the main gimmick of the polem section is that Sonic gains the ability to run up walls, like those hexagonal walls you see there. Now, it wasn't lost on me when we found that the way you skip it is by running up hexagonal walls, but just there's so much symmetry with just the glory of these glitches in this game. They just always line up in such a perfect way like that. And a little fun fact, actually, because Amber was mentioning earlier that this game is, of course, like all the other games in this Fangame series, built on the Sonic Worlds engine. I did it again by accident this time. Fun fact about them is that these wall glitches, the running up walls issues, a bunch of the other ones, like possibly momentum glitches, are actually still present in Sonic Worlds to this day. So you might have noticed similar things like ceiling running or wall running in, say, Freedom Planet, or say Sonic and the Fallen Star, which you'll be seeing later on in this marathon. It all transfers over, and that's the glory of it. Even still to this day, 10 years on, it's still available in the current version of the engine. And in fact, I discovered it in my casual playthrough of Sonic and the Fallen Star. It absolutely still happens regularly. And so much so, I tried to lab a glitch for it that I found by accident, but it didn't really go anywhere. And I think the run does something way more creative and cool. But if you're looking at any of this and you speedrun a Sonic Worlds game, maybe take note to see if it could be applied to your game. And we'll be doing the same vice versa, I can assure you. And that's the benefit of so many of these games sharing so much DNA. It's excellent in that regard. I love that sort of unity between a bunch of these games, not just in spirit, but even in code and the rest of it as well. It's awesome for sure. A real weird thing going on with these suns here, and as you can guess, I'm getting extra jump height here from the bumper gloves as well on these flame things. I'm definitely not meant to be going this fast. These are so broken. Someone suggested we call them the broken gloves from now on. I think officially they should have been called that all along, but oh well. It's not even the end of their usefulness. All throughout this endgame sequence here, which is 6 stages, of which we're on the second one, there's even more use in here. There's even more use in the final boss. There's even more use in the final level before the final boss. It just cracks the entirety of this endgame open, so much so that I really wish they appear earlier in the game, because can you imagine just the level of destruction we'd be witnessing with these things in, like, the mid-game, for example, when all we're doing is just plodding along, hitting checkpoints. It would be so great, but we get to witness this game go down in flames right now, quite literally, because the world's on fire. Both Eggman and Dr. Ukano have pretty much succeeded in their takeover of the Sky Empire, and now as the Resistance, I think that's the story anyway. We got to take them down, so we're just disarming missiles right now, I think, which is a little strange for a Sonic game, but I'll live with it. But we've had the fighter jets and stuff before. But the whole aim of these levels, really, in terms of the level design and gimmicks, is just to keep overwhelming you as the player. They're not necessarily difficult. I'm going to make a safety save there. Not necessarily difficult as much as they are just throwing so many things at you to hope you'll lose track of everything that's going on. So we're introducing new gimmicks here in the form of the water jump, which you can see there, and we can also mix these. Didn't know that fire and water mix. That's a new one to me, but apparently according to this game it's true. But we'll still do our best. It felt a little more like oil and water there, but they still did their best to try and balance these sort of things. But despite that, you guessed it, the bumper gloves also give you extra height when mixing as well. So bless devs here for trying their best. But ultimately, the bumper gloves prevail. So we're just going through this level now. It's a very mazy corridor-like one. There's another variation of this level coming up next, in which I probably won't have an awful lot to say about, because it's very much the same, just with more spikes, more enemies, etc. But the 5th and 6th level of this endgame sequence are really where the action and the what the heck of this run ramps up, so to say. So we're just biding time until this game just truly throws any semblance of trying to be a traditional Sonic game out the window. We've had Jerem already, so we should know what to expect, and it goes full fan game. But for now, we're just dealing with these weird fan gamey physics, trying to make the most of these cycles where we can. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard level. This one translates into the next one, and it only really gets spicy after this point. Nice. That was unintentional. Normally those guys are meant to send you up into the spikes, but they also have the unintended property of giving you the fire boost. Therefore, sometimes you can just use that to your advantage and just go whoosh like that. And I've never quite had it happen in that way, so that's a really fun one. So a lot of water introduced here, and there's a lot of instances where you got to use the other power-ups to jump over the spikes as well. You'll see one shortly with the water, and there's also one with the flame. both of which become trivial as a result of, yet again, our new friend. We'll keep singing its praises because at this point, it's all that there is to say. This level, like mentioned, a lot to do with the last one, really not too much going on. So all we're doing at this point is just triggering the final level. We're only allowed into it. Same deal, there's a wall which goes up, and that only comes down when you complete this sequence. Except there really is no way around that one. There's a big old ceiling above it and a big old ceiling below it, and there's no way you're getting through it. So we do have to do these levels. The only in-game requirement for the bumper gloves also comes after this level, in that there is a single bumper exclusive barrier that you can only break down with it. Aside from that, there is no other check to make sure you have these things, unlike the others unlike the other power-ups where there's multiple checks. There is literally only the one for these bumper gloves, and so that's the only reason why we go out of our way for them. Once again, I'm running on the ceiling, but otherwise, aside from that, in terms of actually being needed for progression, they come so late and don't really do anything, because if you play this game through in the intended order, they don't do anything in the Poland sequence either, because you lose access to all your abilities, so they're just kind of here at the end of the game, but I don't mind at all. But yeah, only really one instance where they're actually truly needed, but they speed things up so much that even if we could find a way to skip them, I think it'd probably still be worth going out of your way to access them. But you've seen a couple of those spike jumps as mentioned. They're really a piece of cake, a walk in the park. Another one coming up here. Definitely not meant to get that much air, am I? But yet I do. So we've also got to make sure we don't miss this. We got to bonk against the ceiling intentionally for a little bit. I barely missed the cool jump onto the button, so that's going to lose a bit of time. But at this point, losing time in this run is a couple of seconds here and there is trivial, considering some of the major things that have gone wrong. Speaking of things gone wrong, Sonic's plan to save the Sky Empire has pretty much at this point gone awry. You can see just what's going on in the background there. We're getting Fangaming, and well, if you thought that was the end of just how weird this plot was about to get, then buckle in, because this is Metronic. The original name for this game, but he instead got the name of this power-up here. So you might have been able to see the actually intended heights that the water and fire bubble things give off. So Metronic doesn't get access to any of Sonic's abilities as per usual. So what he has instead, you might have seen there, he has a block which avoids those screen wipe attacks. So the gist of it is you do get stuck in these screen wipes for a little while. So the optimal way to do it, which I didn't intentionally do there, but I did accidentally get hit. The optimal way to do these things is listen out for the sound cue, and you want to block as early as possible because you do get locked into the animation and you can't move until it's over. So you want to listen exclusively to that sound cue, and that will get you out of it the quickest. Unfortunately, if you do it right as the screen flash happens, you won't be so lucky. And yeah, you'll most likely take damage, as you saw, but you'll also have to sit and wait as well if you don't end up taking that damage. So we're making the best of a bad situation. You remember what I said about the game just trying to overwhelm you? There's so many things going on that we're just having to mentally pay attention to here. These ongoing timers, a bunch of enemies. We've still got all of these enemy fire going on as well. We've got all the spikes still about. We've got all the bubbles. There's so much stuff. I'm playing this very safe. I'd normally play this way more risky, but marathon safety and all that. There's a lot of instances where you want to shield at the absolute last second because you can get up to a higher area where it's more beneficial and the like. It's worth saying as well, the visual cue for this, you might be able to tell from looking, kind of sucks. So if you're playing this game without sound, which I quite often do, the timing on these can be really bad. So you definitely need to keep listening out for these. The visual cue you use is when the flashing goes into the faster flashing, and then you probably wait about 2 or 3 seconds, and that's when you do it. But the sound ends literally right as he's doing it. It's so convenient to listen out for. So that's a little trick if you're playing this game casually, or if you're playing it as a speedrun experience or whatever. It just helps no matter what. 6th and final level here. Yet again, as per tradition with these, we're adding even more to the pot, and we're going to make it even more difficult. So we got these weird electric boogaloo things here. I don't know what to call them otherwise. We have to block through them, and then they let us through, if we're blocking in time, they let us through these gates here. Yet again, same deal. You want to block as early as possible, because the earlier you block, realistically, the better chance you have of not having to deal with getting stuck in the animation. You just want to be in that animation for as little possible time, basically. So that's what we're trying to do, but there really is a balance you unfortunately have to hit. Nice thing about getting hit there as well is you do successfully miss one of the first screen wipes, so I've got quite lucky by missing some of these. I am going to grab this ring for safety, because I should have still been able to get that in time there. Luckily, I have still got this ring. I did unfortunately miss going down that slight shortcut there. You really want to run ahead and shield later kind of thing. Because there's a couple areas in this level in particular where it is beneficial. That was not ideal. There's a couple areas where it is beneficial to run ahead, because then you can block and shield and get access to slight shortcuts. But otherwise, once again, you're seeing just how much this is designed to overwhelm you, because we've added even more ingredients into the pot. But thankfully, this is the very last one. We won't have to deal with it much longer. But guess what? There's another ingredient, because we're about to see more of these electric boogaloo-like things, and they are... Instead, there's going to be no barriers we have to go through, but we do have to time it just right, alongside these screen flashes, which, as you can see here, conveniently happen roughly around now. These things can sometimes have a habit of insta-killing you as well. I don't know why. It sucks. So you really want to do your best to avoid them, but if you're feeling particularly risky that day, you can damage boost them. Wouldn't recommend it, but it is an option, just in case that quick kill thing does happen. But anyways, we now have got through there, and we are pretty much at the end at this point. I'm going to do one final block. There we go. That was a very slow one, as you can see, but it worked. Sometimes you get stuck on slopes like this one, especially if they're kind of pixel perfect height. You're nearly out. Keep praying. I think I am just going to go straight for this at this point. I'm going to use Sonic and just go for it. There we go. We are out, and it is time to see the game to its completion, as we have now unlocked the ability to go to the very last level of the game. Before then, though, we got to backtrack to the main part of the Sky Empire, to which we will now be able to go through the area we went through the staff door. And by doing so, instead, there'll be a new area opened up where we can reach the game's conclusion. So we probably realistically have about 5-10 minutes left at the very most. So now is a good time to kiss goodbye Sonic Chrono Adventure and all that. But hopefully we're not doing too bad for time, because this area has got to be one of my favorites. So I've practiced it quite a lot over the years. And yeah, this one is my favorite level, flat out. I love this level, and this level honestly perfectly orchestrates and perfectly shows off what it is I love about Sonic fan games. This level is just beautiful, both in visual identity, all of the stuff it's got going on. There's all these rotating platforms, there's a bunch of nice screen effects going on. You're going to see as well these rotating platforms are both circles or they're spheres, I guess, more so would actually be more accurate in this case. And they're these squares. You can use them you can jump off them, basically, effectively boosting at just the right height, in a sense. I guess boosting is what I'd call it. It's not quite boost in that sense, but certainly using the squares and the spheres, you can get off them at just the right height. By the way, shout-outs to this weird shenanigans. I don't know what that's all about. But you can get off them at just the right height, and you can see there's a lot of platform cycles going on here. But normally, in an ideal scenario, platform cycles are actually very minimal because of how much leniency you're afforded due to the double jump, and where that can get you, that can skip you beyond quite a lot of these. Like, not right here, it's actually the next set, isn't it? But there's a couple sets of these where you can completely skip them, case in point. That one lined up really nicely. And there is a couple others we're going to see shortly. I'm going to take a ring here just in case. I don't want to collect too many rings between now and the final boss. You can see sometimes you can just phase completely through some of these spikes. There's a lot of those in this level for some reason. I don't quite know why. Yeah, this level is a very beautiful, poetic end. You would never see anything like this in a normal Sonic fan game, and I love it all the more for it. It's just very pretty, very nice to look at. when executed well with these bumper gloves, it is a gorgeous level speedrun, and everything about it is just encapsulates the weird sense of identity that this game and this series has, and it's all the better for it. I love it for doing its own thing rather than trying to fit in with the molds. So we're at the end here now though, but it's goodbye to my favorite. Anyways, final boss time. You'll be pleased to hear it's a two-parter, but it's a two-parter which gets broken wide open yet again, wouldn't you love to hear? So here we go. The bumper gloves, wouldn't you know it, they also do multiple hits of damage to bosses. So you're going to see what would normally be like a 10, 15, 20 hit boss get taken out on its first attack phase, hopefully, if all goes well. There we go, got it. And now we're going into the final boss, which is going to require a lot of explanation, to be honest. So I'm going to try and do it in the downtime that I have here. So I can't attack the boss until an automated sequence plays out. By the way, shout outs to Metal Gear Rising. But there's an automated sequence here in which the boss rises. So I'm going to use this to explain. So we want to take a death here, because what that will do is that will allow us to switch, or that will get us into Metronic mode. So we'll be Metronic at the beginning of this cutscene. We're then, while the screen is still white, going to run all the way over to the right, jump, use his finger gun technique that we've not mentioned yet. That will break the shield. We then use the Redalia dialogue prompt that we've never used before to break back out to normal Sonic. We'll then switch the bumper gloves, firmly lodge ourselves inside his hitbox, and hopefully do all the hits required to get through the boss. It's really quick. I'm probably going to require some concentration. So here goes nothing.
I remember this fight.
Yeah, this fight is really long casually and pretty tough as well, I'd say. But
it is,
as you can see, this is absolutely not the way we're meant to do it. But as long as I can get a couple hits in here, we might be able to finish him off before he starts his actual attack phase. But I get the feeling I'm probably... Nope!
Oh, there we go!
Let's go. So this used to be the end of timing for the run when this boss phase is white, because there's a lot of his attack phases which can get stuck on screen when he gets killed, which leads to you getting killed in various ways. Or sometimes as well, it will kill the ability for the boss to actually finish, which, as you can imagine, especially with how the save system works in this game, if you have to reset to save, that is a long way to go back. So it used to be a timing rule, kind of a gentleman's agreement that we'd stop there. But recently we have found ways like that. That quick kill was actually found yesterday. Ways like that to make this way more consistent. So we now do go to the actual last input. So I'll let you know when that is, but this is a recent change we've had here. So it's really weird to not have to call time there. But we have this one last corridor, which I'm very sloppy at. A lot of other people are very sloppy at because, well, quite frankly, we didn't have to run it. It had to be in the run for the run to be legal, but it really didn't have to actually be played. So I'm doing my best to remember what's going on here. But there we go. We are at the end of the run, and time is now. And there it was. Sonic Chrono Adventure.
Everyone,
thank you ever so much.
Get your GGs out for Green Viper and Sonic Chrono Adventure with some, side trips to some glitchy dreams. But, I had a lot of fun with that run. That was about a just under 119.30. It was a 119.21.
That is genuinely not horrendous, all things considered. The world record right now is hovering around a 112, so considering there was a lot that actually went quite drastically wrong there due to marathon nerves and the like, that's not horrible. My run before I got back into this game as a result of getting accepted into this was like a 130, so we've had a lot of work over the last month or two to find new glitches, really get this down, and the beauty of this game, I think it started around like a 3-hour run, and just through all of the weird stuff you've seen, successfully or unsuccessfully, we've got it down to where it is now. So that's actually super nice. So quite happy with that. So thank you very much for having me in that regard then.
Absolutely my pleasure. Let me go ahead and put a shout out for you out on the Twitch chat. If you all don't follow Green Viper, check them out.
Original Sopnik games, by the way, just showing on screen. Everyone's favorite typo.
There we go. I can type names correctly and not give a shout out to the wrong name. Let's go.
Thank you ever so much. So we're about to see as well here, if we get to the end of the credits, which I don't think is too much longer, we'll see a little teaser for our favorite electric jester. But otherwise, the original Sopnik games is really the highlight here. Everyone loves pointing it out.
Do you have any last shout outs, by the way, while we're wrapping up?
I want to give a shout out in particular to the community behind this game and the other games in the same series. As mentioned, Burnsies was a big help in routing this. It was a collective adventure we went on together, but also there was some other involvement in the form of Zippy Zero, and we had Ducktanion help out as well, I believe, a little bit. So there's been a number of us who've helped out and contributed to get this game to where it is today. If you're interested, I'd highly recommend checking out our Discord server. As of right now, we are a separate server to the main Sonic Fangame server, but I have no idea if that will change in the future. So that's over on speedrun.com. If you like what you've seen, you think you can do better than me, and you want to prove it, then there's a Discord server over there where we're more than happy to give you the help required to pull off some of these tricks here. So that's all I really have to say in that regard. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you to everyone mentioned there.
Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to our next run in just a few minutes. Coming up next is going to be Sonic 3 Air All Emeralds with just Sonic, Glitchless by Core Sonic 3. So stick around. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. And remember, we appreciate you being here. And this is Sonic and the Parallel Worlds, a weekend-long event featuring Sonic fan games, mods, and even more. So use !Sonic in Twitch chat to check out what we have left for the rest of the night, and then check out what we have starting at noon tomorrow as well. So we'll be right back in just a few. Stick around.